Welcome back to the Brent Marcus Show. We're back to talk more CrossFit Games, changes to the season. Everyone loves hearing about that. And then I think we need to kind of dig a little deeper onto the topic of what does it look like after a competitive build and a competition is over for athletes, and then I think people will get a better understanding of why the season and the changes to the season are going to present some problems for folks who are wanting to compete more and more often. And then maybe we could touch on the concept of periodization, which is still misunderstood, and but just like kind of a light touch on it so people know like this is what it takes to thoughtfully build yourself up and be ready for the big show.
Yeah, I love that. That's I guess I'd be curious to hear, because you're not, so these changes have been happening to the CrossFit Games here basically since the conclusion of the 2018 games in August, September there. Me being part of it, when people ask me, what do you think about these? Most of the time I say, I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's like, what am I going to do? Because, either I roll with the punches and just do what they tell me. In the same way when you go to the games and Dave Castro says marathon row, you're like, well, I'm either going to deal with it and do it, or I'm going to leave. Like, it's not really my place to think like, I think that's stupid, because that doesn't do you any good. So I'd be curious maybe to start, because that's kind of been my instinctual reaction, and a necessary one with these changes. I'd be curious, because you're not, in it right now, what have you been thinking about the changes?
Yeah, I mean, I still always look at the season through the lens of a competitor, where, hey, you chose to sign up for this sport, you got to play by their rules. And it's not like basketball, NBA, where they change a rule every few years and it's minor. It's like they could change anything anytime. So that's a sport you signed up for. And there's definitely a motivation to control people's lives in terms of schedule, in terms of, we're going to do this, we're going to do it this way, and it just keeps people engaged year round. I've looked at it from a business perspective, because I think that was a huge motivator for CrossFit HQ, was to say, hey, we need to get back to our core, which is trying to get trainers certified, build affiliates around the world, and spread the message of basically health and fitness as opposed to competitive exercising, which I applaud them for saying that and being like, hey, this is what we're about, this is what we want to focus on. I know it really hurt a lot of people along the way who worked on the competitive side of CrossFit, who were in media and all kinds of things. It's really been a big shakeup. But as it's playing out, I still think the goal was always to find the fittest. Are the fittest people going to still be at the games? Yes. Are there going to be, whatever it is, 10 people competing for the title of fittest on earth that are deserving? Totally. And it's probably going to be the same 10 that would have been there anyway. It's just it's just a different route to get there. The thing that I have always been a little bit critical of is how this sport spans really a full calendar year for anybody that really loves it. And that is such a difference than, mentality than any other sport that's out there. There is no off season for the sort of mid-range CrossFitter. The mid-level CrossFitter is just like qualifier, competition, next week another qualifier, competition, open, another qualifier, local throwdown, go to the games for spectating, compete the next weekend because I'm all fired up off the energy that I saw Brent out there pumping his fists, and I'm going to go do that. And then they just do it over and over and over again. And with this sort of format to the year, I think there's going to be more of that. There's more qualifiers spread out. There's more opportunities to go and compete. Now I think regional or local level competitions in the back of their mind are like, oh, if I keep putting on a great event, I might become a sanctional event down the road. So there's going to be more of that popping up. And Yeah, I mean, it just could end up being like every weekend there's something to do that's a little bit higher level. And that could potentially spell disaster for some people who are going to get sucked into doing too much and have a very short career or a short period of time where they're fulfilled by competing. And then for the folks that are smart and do it the right way, I think it's just as much pressure as there ever was. I imagine for you, it's like you got the April event that you're like, I got to go and win this thing. That's my shot. And I don't mean to I don't want to stir up anything for you, but I'm thinking in the mindset of you. It's like, okay, so Brent's he's got to peak for the Asia CrossFit Championships, or sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but he's got to go win it. And if something goes wrong, when's the next chance for him to go? What's his backup? Oh, it's in June. Holy shit, what a turnaround time. He has to come up with some energy to go to Granite Games and then win that. Or, so those are just my initial thoughts, but I'm definitely curious to kind of hear the mentality as you're in it, both for yourself, like how are you approaching your run to the games? Like what's your plan to get to the games? And then what have you noticed from the two events that you've seen happen so far? What have you learned from what's already unfolded?
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, the information started to kind of come out and sanctioned events started to be announced, and I was talking to my new coach, and I'm like, we need to kind of put our foot in the ground here and make a plan, because I need to periodize. I want to peak. I want to go to a competition and feel like, I can go there and beat anyone who shows up. That's what I need to feel like. I said, I mean, there's sort of two ways to go about this at least the current season. And we're like, option one is you just keep doing events. Like, you just do as many as you can until you win one, and you just train hard or die trying. And I'm like, that's not really me. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Especially I was like, Dubai's coming up, and we just didn't feel like we're like, we've sort of been just working on rebuilding some stuff and doing some more like bodybuilding type stuff. And I'm like, you'd have to do a really quick ramp up. And I've never been there, and there's all these other guys that have been there. So we're like, okay, we're not going to do that. And then we're like, well, should we do Wadapalooza? And we're like, yeah, maybe. But then we're like, you know what? Let's just build. Let's get to a place where we feel like in April, you're just going to be unstoppable. And so hopefully it works out. And if it works out, it'll hopefully look like a genius. And then if it doesn't, then like you said, I'm probably going to go to Granite Games or an event like that, and then go to another one and another one to try to desperately qualify. And then hopefully there's enough steam left in the tank to do well at the games. And I think there's a misconception by a lot of people. They're like, well, don't you just crush workouts all year? And I'm like, yeah, but there's kind of more to it than that. There's like a build-up of a lot of different pieces. It's a different sport. It's not, basketball, you can kind of just, and I'd imagine basketball players ideally would have some sort of peak as well and would try not to burn themselves out at the beginning of a season. But it's basketball. You shoot hoops and you run back and forth. Like, this is a lot more jarring on the body in a lot of ways. And, if you just crush workouts at high intensity and high volume, 6 days a week all year, and then you're like, well, hey, whenever a competition comes up, I'm just going to do it and then I'll be great. It's like, yeah, that's not how I play the game. And it's not how Matt Frazier and Patrick Vellner play the game either. I'll tell you that, because I know them well enough to know that's not what they do. They have an off season. So it's going to be interesting next year, because like you kind of alluded to, next year we're going to have the games, and then there's this really short turnaround time for all the games athletes to try to re-peak to do the open, which could be their qualification. Then they could have 10 months off. So I'm going to peak for the games, and then I'll take a break, but I can't take too much of a break because the open's important. And then you're already fit at the end of the open. So do you just like try to hold on to that and do some comps in December, or do you take your off season and then try and do some comps in like April? Yeah. So I don't know, we haven't really, haven't looked that far ahead, but it's interesting. I think that, if you're not careful, the lifespan of a top level games athlete or someone who's trying to make that push to that level, the lifespan could become a lot shorter. And yeah, and then even from I look at this year, and I'm fortunate enough that I've had some good years, and so I can get in contact with the owners of these competitions, these sanctioned events, and say, I'd like an invite, please, and they'll probably give one to me. But for everyone else, they have to do these online qualifiers. And so you're pouring yourself fully into these like intense online qualifiers for Wadapalooza, Granite Games, and they all have a different one. And before you know it, every single week you're either competing in person or you're doing an online qualifier all year round with this hope of getting to the games. And then, you might finally make it. You come 30th and you're just like so busted from finally making it, and that, you just can't catch up to where like the top guys are. So.
This is my biggest challenge with being a competitive fitness athlete from the beginning, because I got into CrossFit under the impression that you could do it 3 days on, 1 day off, high intensity every day, year round, and you would be elite. And so I had it in my brain that, many of us started pre the true sport days. We were just in the CrossFit to be badass days. And then we were just dabbling in competition, and it sort of kind of built. So despite my experience with traditional sporting seasons, I got sucked into this notion of like, oh, I should just be able to go all the time. And then of course, what I saw on the journal and on other internet, media sources was guys that just looked like they got after it all the time. Like they didn't have an off season. There was just Chris Spieler who was always ready to go, and he would just put out these great performances. And there was Jason Khalipa, who was the same way. He didn't have like a stop button. And I never really saw somebody until you came along that was publicly very clear, like, yes, I do banded deadlifts right now. I don't do Fran right now. Like, this is not the time for me to do that. Yeah. And anyway, that was many years of just like experiencing this, and we will talk about it now, but just sort of that like letdown after a competitive build, and then feeling like, why can't I should be able to get after it again today. Like, it's kind of like the Jacob Hepner mentality. It's like, he could just go hard anytime, any day. I'm under the impression that the guy could literally just roll out of bed and be like, I'm going to compete this weekend. I'm probably going to win, because that's his approach, and that's what he's kind of presenting. And I kind of used to have a lot of negative self-talk about not being able to do that. Like I couldn't turn it around that fast, and I couldn't do every online qualifier without totally melting down as like a person on an emotional and physical level, right? So that's it's just such a misconception out there. I think people are starting to realize that it's not like that. I don't think Rich helped it early on. I mean, he was another model for me where I was like, okay, Rich just does it high volume and goes pretty hard every day. It's kind of the same all the time. So I should be able to do it. Why can't I do that? And, obviously, like, we don't all get to see fully inside of Rich's true training and what he's doing, and same with Matt, and but it's starting to surface more where it's like, that's not how people are approaching this sport. Anybody that's really successful, the majority of them that are really successful, and then you as the fitness consumer out there, you also shouldn't be approaching it that way, because the repercussions are pretty severe. I mean, this is our body, and this is like our health and our physiology, and there are rules that just cannot be broken. I mean, they're just rules, and you put out if your adrenal glands are working overtime for months on end to get you ready, and the lactic acid production every session day after day is just building and building and building, your body's going to be like, okay, Brent, it's time to take it's time to press pause. And if you don't do it at the right time, that pause could come, like you said, a week before you're supposed to go out and win, the competition. But it's going to come at some point. And that feeling that I describe it as is just feeling like going from being the fittest in the room to the least fit person anywhere at my gym or anywhere I go. Like, I can't walk well. I don't feel energetic. My joints ache. I'll get bouts of depression that just sort of come out of nowhere. It's like, well, I'm depressed. It's like, because, yeah, my body is telling you to just slow down and you're not listening to it.
Yeah. Man, I love that. Everything there, I tell people all the time, I'll see people doing certain things and I'll be like you have one body. Like you have this like capsule that you're in, and every dent on there can be buffed out to a certain extent, and if you're obviously the bigger your goals are that require your body, the more dents you might have to accumulate in order to reach a goal. But for the average fitness enthusiast, I'm like, why are you not deadlifting better? Well, the workout of the day says I'm like, RX is just whoever happened to make that program happened to put 225 there. It doesn't mean anything, like, why don't you do 135 and do it perfect? Well, I'm like, like, it's your body, like, it just doesn't matter. And like you said, I mean, I think that there's, and all those things about the misconceptions, where you get a taste of what people are doing on social media, right? Whether that's a Hepner or Froning or Kalipa back in the day, and maybe they are just crushing workouts every day. Maybe it's 20 workouts a day, maybe it's 2. Maybe there is more periodization than you think. You don't know, but I know me personally. I look at what I was capable of at the games or regionals, and then let's say 2 months after the games, I'm like, yeah, I'm less fit now than I was 2 months ago. Doesn't mean I'm not making progress, right? I'm making progress in the right areas. I'm rebuilding up my unilateral stability. I'm building up my core strength. I'm fixing a little bit of a shoulder tweak that I had that was wasn't great, but it was fine enough to do everything I needed to do at the games. And then it's like, okay, I need to take that month or 2 off to really get that settled back, and then think of like the 4 things I suck the most at, get those better for 3 months, and everything else kind of stays the same, gets worse. And then you build it all back. And then a year later, I tell people, the only thing that matters is how fit I am, to qualify, but then come August. Because that's what people are going to know. It's like, I don't, I rarely PR my, my snatch or my clean and jerk, kind of like the big lifts, or my Fran. I'm in training, because I'm just it's not when I'm ready for it. You should, whereas at regionals, there's this temptation, I'm sure you've had this, leading up to a big competition, if you've periodized right that 2 weeks before, you're just like, I really want to PR something right now, because
Yeah.
you could. You just look at the bar and you're like, I could PR my jerk, I could PR my overhead squat, I could PR my snatch, I'd probably double my snatch PR, because you just feel so good and you feel so strong and so fit, and that feeling's addicting. And then you finish the games and you're just spent. And then I know after the games I have trouble sleeping. For usually a week to 3 weeks, I get terrible sleep. I'm just all wound up still.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I can't get the energy to train, but I have too much energy to sleep. And, everything's sore, and and then you do try to go hard in a workout, and there's just this block. There's just this something subconsciously being no, you don't get to push the sled that fast today. And it just hurts,
Gosh,
So
when you
so
said that thing
strange.
about this,
And then I used to see the videos of guys, in the sport, that they seem to be able to do that, and it's what's wrong with me? Why am I just not tough enough?
yeah. Well, when you said the thing about the sleep, it reminded me of just the night after the games was over, worst night's sleep. Partly because just so wound up, probably ate a bunch of bad food, probably drank some alcohol, and just I got no sleep at all. And then on top of that, the nights after grid league matches were the most painful nights of my life. And I have now had 2 babies and up sleepless nights. I would trade one of those nights any night for the post grid league match sleep, which would be no sleep. And those Eleiko bars from all the reps, my hands would just be throbbing at night, just on fire, sleeping oh my God, when's it going to be morning? My hands hurt like crazy, just hilarious. Anybody that played grid knows the hand pain that I'm talking about. It was brutal. And then something else came to mind too when you were discussing that, but it was, it's again, it's thinking about, what is the goal for an individual, I think I came to realize late in the game what it really meant to be a competitive fitness athlete. It meant a big build up and a big come down. And I didn't accept that until I was really done, until I was a year removed. And now I see it as part of the process. So when I was in it, I would fight the mental battle of like, why is this happening? This shouldn't be happening, and I don't like the way it's happening. And that's a big topic that isn't discussed. It's when somebody's mind and their perception of what should happen isn't aligned with what's physically happening in their body, can create so much conflict for people that come to the gym that are just every day wanting to look good and feel good, or competitive athletes. But if you accept it, you know it, and I see that in you, is that acceptance of these 2 months are not about me being the fittest on earth. They're about me rebuilding, and you own that, and it propels you further in your career versus somebody else who's like, this. And I'm that other guy, like in 2013, like, why can't I get back to do, so I waste 2 months, and then I start to train again finally, and I start to kind of feel good right before the Open, and then the Open just ruins that, so it was always such a bummer. It was like, I'm finally starting to feel good, and now you want me to do the Open?
Yeah.
Damn it. Hey guys, Marcus Philly here, Revival Strength and Functional Bodybuilding. I want to talk about unilateral and bilateral training today. We emphasize a ton within our training programs and our coaching platforms, unilateral training as a base for strength. It is a key functional bodybuilding principle that we coach, where we develop unilateral strength before we move on to bilateral strength. Why is that? Well, the first topic I think that is important to acknowledge and to name regarding unilateral training is the development of motor control. Now, motor control is a term that gets thrown around a lot. What it's referring to specifically is the mind's ability to control muscle activity. So the mind-muscle connection. I like to speak about this a lot. It is something that is undervalued when people are trying to move fast. So slowing down and training one side of the body at a time is a really useful way to help athletes develop motor control. When we see motor control not achieved in movement prior to moving fast, you see people move with lots of wobble and shake within their limbs. So somebody with poor motor control doing an air squat has pelvis rounding at the bottom of their squat, has knees shaking side to side, has feet collapsing at the bottom of their squat. So if we do something, and the example in this case is going to be a split squat. If we use a split squat, which is a unilateral exercise, it's training single hip and single leg strength one at a time. It's going to allow an athlete to really focus and have fewer variables happening at any given time, but focus the mind to the stabilizer muscles of one hip at a time. So we would prescribe the unilateral exercise, the split squat, for somebody who's developing motor control under a very slow tempo or long time under tension. So I would demonstrate 3 seconds down, 3 seconds up, all the while trying to control the movement of this exercise with my hip, glute, quad, keeping my trunk engaged, and really being able, because it's a one-sided exercise, being able to connect all of my thoughts and my thinking, my nervous system signals to that single hip. What you'll see if you develop this type of strength through unilateral exercises, whether it be unloaded like this or loaded with kettlebells, dumbbells, or barbell, is that over time you will have better control of movement when you move to bilateral training.
I think, I don't talk about this a lot, at least not on like camera, but in between, we had to take like a couple little breaks here, and we were talking about the Open, and I personally have spoken to a lot of regional level, games level athletes, and it's pretty unanimous that most of us do not enjoy the Open. Would you agree? Yeah. And the reason for me, like, I like what it does for the community. I love the energy in the gyms for the local like the local athletes and people who you see people get their first muscle ups. You see people do things they haven't been able to do before with that atmosphere. And I think sometimes that energy is a little misguided. You see people, all of a sudden there's a ring muscle up workout and they're in the gym 5 days in a row trying to get their first muscle up, and I'm like, well, where's that energy the other 360 days of the year from last year? Like that always kind of irks me. I'm like, like the rings are there, like they're hanging all year. You don't do the drills, the drills, and then all of a sudden the open workout's announced, and all of a sudden it's this do or die. I got to get my first one again, or got to get one more, 2 in a row, which is a little frustrating. But as a whole, I do like the energy. From a competitive standpoint, for me, one thing I find it's sort of frustrating on 2 fronts. Like one, historically, I've done well in the open. I've had some good years and some not as good years in the open. But what's always strange for me and frustrating is, I usually am pretty fit during the open. I go as hard as I can. I'll do the workouts once, sometimes twice. And then there's these people every year that beat me in the open or right next to me. And then every time I train with them, or more importantly, when I compete against them, like let's say at regionals or something, or another off-season comp like a Wadapalooza, I'm much better than them. It's just like it's a clear clear separation, and that to me that's frustrating. And I don't, I have a variety of reasons why that might be. I mean, some of it's programming, but yeah. And so for me, it's like I'm doing the open again this year to hopefully. I believe the rules are, how you place in the open is going to be your rank going into the games. So, your seeding, your heats in the first day or two, which is nerve-wracking because, my trust in the open as a system to rank athletes is not very high. Yeah. And secondly, it interrupts training. It's 10% of the year. It's 5 weeks of 52 weeks of the year that you don't get to train, because you're in between these really intense workouts. You can't be too sore for them. You got to mentally and physically be like ready to rock, like for 5 weekends in a row. It's just weird, stressful.
Yeah. Well, I haven't missed the open the last 2 years. That's for sure. And as being an outsider who's not doing it, when you're not involved in it, it can be. You're right. It's a beautiful thing to watch. Like when we have athletes here that do the workouts, like I get fired up for it. But the years that I was competing in it, I wasn't the best cheerleader. I wasn't the best support to other people because I'm just in my own head. It's hard to get out of your own head when a lot's riding on the line, and you spend all this time building yourself up to be an athlete in the sport, and then you got to do this qualifier that's not really truly a representation of like what you're going to do in these live competitions. So yeah, it always troubled me a bit. And I think that I don't know, maybe you're this way, like, where your weaknesses are, your deficits are as an athlete, whether it's mental or physical, and you see it in another person, you're like, oh, I wish I had that, and I kind of feel that way about like guys that just crush the open every year. And I'm like, God, I wish I could just be Noah. Like he must just have a good time, like, or they must just have a great time doing this. It's just right in their wheelhouse. But of course, it can't be inside their brains. I'm sure they have their own demons and stressors too.
I think everyone goes through some stress during the open that's at a high level, and it is, the come down. Like people ask me like, do you get stressed at competitions? I'm like, at regionals, games, Wadapalooza, Asia, like not really. The open, yeah.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
It's different. Like it seems like I think there's something about the fact that when you go to a competition, you got one crack at that workout, and there's this like serenity to that, and everyone's going to be out there, and you just go and you do it, and then it's gone. But when it's the open, there's always this like, you don't know, there's this like unknown, what are other people doing, and like, am I gonna have to do this again, and is my barbell close enough to the pull-up bar, like what if it's too close, whereas in the competition, so many more things are sort of decided, there's less factors, and it's just like, well, let's do it.
Yeah, funny story, like we reconfigured our gym here. We just moved into a new space about 6 months ago. No, and I'm not doing the open. I didn't do it, in the last couple of years, but now I'm thinking ahead, and I'm like, okay, if I do the open here, like my pull-up rig is too far from the wall. Like, what if I have to do toes to bar and handstand push-ups? Like, we might have to move some things, you know? Oh man, it's a trip.
I love that. That happened to me last year. I came as soon as the muscle up workout was announced, because you had bar and ring in the same workout. I like went to the gym and was like drilling and undrilling the muscle up rings to put them closer to the rig. Like, why am I doing this? Like, why is this part of what needs to happen in order for me to qualify? This is ridiculous. Oh man.
Yeah, the necessary equipment to be successful in the open is you must have a drill on hand to move equipment that is bolted to your ceiling.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we're going to stay on the topic of unilateral training, and we're going to move on to talking about balance. We just got finished talking about motor control, the importance of that when moving into bilateral exercises. The second thing we're talking about is balance, and what we mean by that is side-to-side strength balance. Is your right side as strong as your left side? One big fault that we see is that when doing bilateral training, so loaded on both sides or using both sides of the body at the same time, is that if an athlete has a bias, let's say their left side is already stronger than their right, then they're going to be compensating in that exercise with their left side. They're going to be doing more of the work with that left side than the right side, and then bilateral training actually makes those imbalances worse over time. So by doing unilateral training, we actually can, in essence, isolate one side of the body and develop balance side to side. I'm going to talk about unilateral loading because it's another variation that we do in our coaching platforms and our training programs that is essentially creating a unilateral discrepancy when we're doing some exercise like a squat. So this movement I'm going to show you is a kettlebell front rack squat with a single arm. When we do that, one side of the body is going to get more loading than the other, which is going to create a dominance of the right hip, the right torso, the right obliques, the right shoulder, the right scapula, all having to work more so than the left side. Of course, we would want to do both sides equally within our training. We want to do the same number of repetitions on each side of the body so that we create balance. And one tip that we give you is that if you know you have one side that's generally weaker than the other, we always start on that side of the body when we're doing our unilateral loaded bilateral exercises. My left side is my weaker side, so I'm going to start by doing my left side kettlebell front rack squat on this loaded arm only. What I can feel in doing that exercise just with the load on one arm is that this shoulder has to work more. I'm having to make more mind-muscle connections with this scapula, packing it down. This side of my abdominals is getting more and more tension as I'm going into the squat to avoid rotation that happens every time we load up one side of the body more than the other. And then as my hips are trying to balance the fact that I have one side loaded more, this hip is actually having to engage a bit more. So by doing both sides individually in terms of loading, we're going to get each side trained equally, as opposed to if I had both kettlebells loaded at the same time, I do my squat, I might favor my right side because it's my stronger side. So those are unilateral tips for balance. Go ahead and give them a try today.
Let's switch gears a bit here and talk a little more about training right now. What's been how's training been going lately? What keeps you coming back to the gym? What's been challenging or rewarding about your training lately?
Yeah, this has been so now just to recap, we had my wife gave birth to our second daughter just over a month ago. So
congrats.
I'm going through sort of like a physical, emotional obstacle and also joyous time all kind of put together. As it relates to my training, it's an obstacle to me training and getting in like great workouts to perform better and to improve my fitness. But it's also this special time where we're bonding with our new daughter, and she's getting to have this relationship with her sister in some way, and so it's just, for me, it kind of is marking this like this new starting point where I know I'm not at my best right now, and during those couple weeks around the birth, I wasn't really training much at all, and sort of was like winding down to that point, knowing it was coming, and sort of setting an intention to sort of make this a period of time to build, which it gets me excited because I know that that's what many of the people that I coach and work with and resonate with out there in the world deal with on a semi-frequent basis. There might be 2 to 3 times a year that they kind of get out of a rhythm. They lose consistency. I mean, it's easy to talk in like the competitive fitness speak, like, you know, I haven't missed a workout in 4 years kind of thing, but most people are missing workouts, and they might be missing a month of a workout, and they might have big life obstacles that come up that take them away from the gym. So feeling a bit of that myself, and then having to approach training with the mindset of, okay, I have to rebuild. I have to overcome the obstacles that are in front of me as well, to prioritize my fitness, to prioritize my health, to see a goal that I may have of, let's say I want to compete as a 35. I want to win the CrossFit Games in 2020 as a 35-year-old masters athlete. Should there be a competition for me to compete in? If that's a goal of mine, then, you know, how do I overcome the physical, emotional, mental obstacles that are in my life that I welcome into my life? I want to have a business that's successful. I want to have a family that's growing. I want to have, you know, the things that do limit one's ability to be successful in the gym. So it's been, that's gotten me kind of fired up to come and dedicate my 90 minutes of training or 2 hours of training and make it epic, you know, make it really the best it can be. And being the best it can be doesn't mean going full tilt. It means all the things we've talked about. It's being mindful. It's having awareness of what I need to be bringing on any specific day, not overdoing it. Yeah, I only got 6.5 hours of sleep last night. There's no way around that. I was up doing diaper changes, feeding, you know, calming a baby, and so I'm not going to come in and snatch heavy. I'm going to come in and refine my motor patterns, and I'm going to develop skills that I need to develop, so that when I get a full night's sleep down the road, I can be in the right place to be successful. And that is probably a more an easier concept for most people to connect with than, yeah, I kind of had to, I imagine, you know, figure out how to fit in my 3 2-hour training sessions today. Which, that's not to take anything away from it. I love it.
That's really cool, because it's something you see all the time. You know, people get out of the training rhythm, whether that's, you know, because of Christmas holidays, or, you know, they're moving, or whatever that looks like. Maybe really the work's really busy, and, you know, family, whatever. And then it's finding a way to kind of reignite that fire, but also do it like mindfully and not overstep, you know, and try and get in and crush 2 workouts, and then you're so sore you can't move for a week, and then you don't want to come back because you're like, oh, I'm just going to be sore again. That's a cool, that's a good challenge, and hopefully something like, you know, obviously you'll have, you know, that life experience is going to add to your abilities as a coach, right?
Yeah, and that's always been a valuable way for me to look at any of this. Is I started as a coach in this industry, became a competitive athlete, and how have any of the things I've done competitively, how do they all tie back to coaching individuals who are not necessarily competitors?
Yeah, 100%.
What about you, Brent? I mean, maybe specifically speak to the, people might think, oh, you got all the time in the world to train, but it doesn't mean it's easy every time. Like, what gets you motivated, and what keeps you motivated to come into the gym and do the necessary work to be successful?
Yeah, I think, you know, something I kind of have realized is how your personality traits, is going to kind of meander, but it'll get back to the point here. How personality traits of a person reflect themselves in everything that you do, and particularly in competition. And what I've sort of found is, you know, in 2016, when I had my first games appearance, I had 4 event wins. Sorry to bring that up again. And then 2017, I had 2, and then last year I didn't have any. And there's a number, like a huge part of that is programming, right? But there are other factors that play into that. And I think there was this sort of, in that first year, there was kind of this X factor, this excitement, this energy, this youthful kind of fun to what I was doing. And I found that a lot of my success was from being methodical. And I sort of, as I became busier and busier, I had this full-time job and I was training full-time, I became like very robotic in my life in order to fit everything in, which allowed for me to become better. And I got a silver medal out of it at the games, but that sort of spark, wasn't there. And like, you can look at the end of, I finished those events in 2016 and I was celebrating and yelling and kind of pumping my chest, and that sort of energy and adrenaline decreased each year. And although the consistency in my performances improved, my like top 15 finishes were much higher, whereas I didn't have the massive ups and downs. Because there were less massive ups, there were also less massive troughs. And so something I've been trying to get back into my training, and especially because I'm training more and it can feel like a chore because it is really my job now, is fun. Yeah, roundabout way, trying to put fun back into my training as much as possible. Still really focusing on the small details, which has been enjoyable in my type A nerdy enjoyable way, because I have more time in the gym. I can be like, like my session's done, I'm gonna like mess around with the damper on the rower and just like kind of row for like 20 minutes and just figure out like strokes per minute, damper, like calories per hour versus 500 meter splits, like how do those all interact with each other, and then kind of like ponder it and then come back to it in a week so I can think in the next workout I do with calories per hour, meters, like what can I do with this damper and that strokes per minute, and modulate that to better my score. So like that stuff's been fun, but honestly just trying to put more fun into my training, instead of trying to like, this preservation of energy was a very common theme for a couple of years, where I was like, the more adrenaline, the more excitement you put in, the less energy you're going to have on that final day of competition, because you're just going to get zapped by this sort of like emotional outpouring of like celebration and like getting pumped up and then failing or succeeding, and like all those ups and downs emotionally and adrenaline. By the final day, you're not going to have as much juice. But I think that I might have taken that to the extreme recently, and so like let's say in the 2018 games to a certain extent, and that was a reflection of my character as well, and my personality during that year, because I was so robotic last year to fit everything in. And now, so when I'm doing a training session with heavy squat cleans, or it's a sprint, I'll just try and get myself fired up for it, turn up the music and just get into it, and kind of kick and scream if I fail a little bit, just, or if I do well, kick and scream, and like within, without being a total moron about it, but, just trying to like ride the highs and embrace the lows and kind of just sort of see what happens from that. And it's been fun. And keeping that fun, because there's so much training, has been a cool part of training recently, and something I'm, tapping into my younger self when, when you first started and you got a snatch PR, like it was a freaking big deal, and now those kind of moments happen less often, yet when they do happen, I'm not as emotionally attached to them, because I'm just so focused on like, well, that's good, but that's supposed to happen, moving on. And now I'm kind of trying to revel in those moments more, really enjoy them.
Totally, man. It's so important. And I think it's, I was thinking about that 4 wins, 2 wins, 0 wins, kind of thinking about like Josh Bridges' career in the games. And like, he used to be this finisher, was just like 6 event wins. Every year was a little bit less. And the competition's gotten better and harder to win events, because there's people that are really good at individual things, but you can burn that out over the years, and then fall into this pattern of being so robotic and methodical that you're not actually experiencing the true joy and excitement of what you're doing on a daily basis. Like, dude, you just did something awesome, and you just like walked off like it was nothing. And getting that back is important, I think. And letting out a little bit of that, just whatever that inner energy, inner excitement is, periodically can can definitely prep you and get you ready to know how to hit a high at a competition too. You have to have that pattern in your
right?
brain.
Like kind of, and then learning. I think knowing when and how to tap into that when it's needed in certain events, I think will be beneficial and will be fun, right? I think that it'll be fun, and a little more of that kind of killer instinct at certain stages of competition is important. And I think that there were times when that might have been lacking in the last couple of years. So I'm looking forward to implementing that. And it's already been showing in training. Not. I'm still playing. Not that I'm playing it safe, but there've been certain situations where I'm like, all right, like what weight should I put on the bar next? And like now I'm like the heavier one.
Yeah.
Do it. And that might not have been. I'm like, well, Brent, you got to be careful. Like, you don't want this to be the reason you pull it. And I'm like, nah, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And just kind of, So.
I have a client that I was talking to yesterday, and he was like, my New Year's resolution was to start using my 55-pound plates more, like, because he has this nice set of red competition plates from the games that have just collected dust, and so now he makes jumps to 155 and all of his like lifts. And he's like, it doesn't feel that much harder. I feel like I'm getting stronger. And it's like, he's just making that little extra push, and he's in a good place to do it, right? He's, don't just, if you're feeling tired, don't go into the gym and be like, throw on the 55s, right? But it's funny how little shifts like that and how you approach how you might do weightlifting can lead to just new confidence in yourself, and it's like, I don't start with the 25s on the bar anymore. I start with the 45s, and okay, I'm doing okay, and anyway, that's not a prescription to the world to go ahead and make 135 jumps every day.
It's for most people. That's most people. I mean, I'm sure you see this all the time. There's certain people that need to be pushed. Certain people need to be pulled back. And I think I've realized that, I need to be pushed a little more, and I'm doing that internally. I need to be like, it's okay, Brent, like go faster, go harder. Like, you're not going to die. Whereas a lot of people, especially people that stick with CrossFit, because people that stick with CrossFit are typically crazy, they need to be pulled. It's like, hey, like that's too heavy, that's too fast. Like, be more mindful, which is why the Awaken Training Series is here.
Yeah. Good plug, Brent. I like it. No, but speaking of kind of like your average gym goer, whether it's a CrossFit or somebody just hitting the conventional gym, like, is there what's something that stands out to you that you see them doing that you wish you could broadcast a message out there and say, hey, stop doing this or think about this?
I was about to do another plug there, but the Professor Project. Sign up. No, I'm kidding. I think having a why behind what you do, like having like, why am I going to the gym? Like, why am I going to the gym? And then, like, how am I doing everything as opposed to kind of what am I doing? I think people get a little wrapped up in like, what's the workout and what's the weight on the bar and how fast did I just go, instead of like why am I here? If you're not doing this to like compete at the highest level, if it's usually for most people, it's like a health and wellness physique goal type thing combined with maybe a little bit of like competing in some aspect. And obviously there's, balance between those. But odds are a lot of it is just health, wellness, feeling good, looking good. Then like make your decisions in the gym based off that goal. Like, if it doesn't feel good and if doesn't look good, or you had a rough day, it's like, go easier or go harder if you feel great, or go heavier, but like having that why, like, why am I in the gym? Why did I come here today? And focusing all your decisions when you're in the gym around that. And I think, you're going to reach that goal, or that why is going to be expressed so much better. Instead of just kind of like rolling through the motions and trying to go really fast and trying to go heavy and leaving. And it's like, well, but that's like, it's such an amazing potential hour to 2 hours of your day going to the gym. It's like, it's your time, and you can like express yourself so well through your body. Maybe it's the only time of the day you get to do that. And if you're just kind of like rolling through the motions or doing what someone else tells you because you don't even know why, I think there's a problem.
Okay, the final piece that I want to address with unilateral training and its benefits and its carryover to bilateral training is as follows. When we're doing bilateral training, many of us and many of you viewers are fans of fatigued mixed modal training. So if you do CrossFit, if you do high intensity functional fitness, even if you like to engage in some of our functional bodybuilding programs, when we get into situations where we're training bilaterally with barbells under fatigue, what we see is that we almost never set up perfectly to the barbell. If we're trying to push for time, or if we're trying to do something where repetitions matter and you're trying to move quickly, there's often a slight deviation in, perfect bilateral mechanics. So what I mean by that is I might step up to a front squat, I pick up the barbell and I'm trying to move quickly. I may be slightly off to the right because I didn't set my feet perfectly. If I'm slightly off to the right, then in essence, I'm doing a unilaterally biased exercise. And if I've built up resilience within my strength training by doing unilateral training like split squats or single arm kettlebell rack squats, then I'm in a very good position to accommodate for those little shifts in balance that may happen under fatigue. So anybody that's out there loves the sport of fitness, anybody out there that loves to do high intensity work, anybody that likes to push themselves within the gym with loaded implements, you better have a great base of unilateral strength work underneath you so that you can handle the deviations that are definitely going to come. There's one additional part of the resilience point that I'm making right now, which is life is not bilateral in nature. Going out into your day, going to work, to the office, back home, waking up, reaching down to get your laundry off the floor, nothing happens perfectly within one plane of motion. We're constantly rotating, shifting to one side, loading up more of our body in movements of life. And therefore, being trained unilaterally in your strength training program is going to give you a lot of resilience against the injuries or the stresses that life puts on you within training and outside of training. So most injuries that we see happen outside of training, people in their day-to-day lives, and by training in the gym in a way that mimics what life is going to offer you, you build up resiliency against injury. So prioritizing your resistance training unilaterally is a great way to help preserve your health when you're both training and outside the gym.
What about you? What do you see the average gym goer, whether that's at a functional fitness gym, a slightly competitive CrossFitter, or just like a regular gym? Yeah, what would you want to tell them, help them with?
Well, I was going to echo a lot of what you just said because it resonates with me so much too. The notion of you thinking your way through what we're doing on a regular basis. And the part that means a lot to me is that the more you understand why you're doing something, the better opportunity you have to bring the right intent to that aspect of your training. And when you do it, and what I mean by the right intent, it's matching what the purpose is with the effort. And ultimately that leads to people having more success, reaching their goals faster, and having an opportunity to do what they're doing for longer. So longevity, when somebody just comes in and smashes hard workouts all the time, and they just are going as hard as they can, they're not thinking about the why, and they're not gonna have a long career or a long fulfilling gym experience. They're gonna burn out. And so I completely agree with that. And sort of understanding the why behind what you're doing. It's a big part of what drives the design of Awaken Training Series is creating situations where people really are forced to slow down and think about what they're doing. And then I think on top of that, it's this notion of when a lot of people have gotten into functional fitness through CrossFit, and the CrossFit gym is a beautiful place, but the equipment in CrossFit gyms is messed up. There's 100 barbells, there's 100 boxes, there's 100 kettle. Like there's all these things that work for groups of 20 to exercise together, but there isn't dumbbells that range in any reasonable amount of weight. There's kettlebells in only 3 different sizes. You know, there's no, there isn't a cable crossover machine. There isn't like the stuff that has been used in training for years. And so I think I want to see people get outside of the daily common movement patterns. Like, stop doing barbell work every single day. Like, unilateral work is such a valuable tool. So it's starting to encourage people to evaluate, like, am I just doing this because that's what I have available? Like, that's what somebody told me I should be doing, and it's built on the idea that I need to fit 20 people into the same space doing the same exercises at the same time? Or is this really what's best for my body right now? Should I be thinking about ways of expanding my movement library, so to speak?
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's those are some really cool questions for people to ask themselves. Expanding the movement library it's so funny. I think a lot of times in CrossFit we get so wrapped up in trying to master a handful of really complicated movements, you know, like the snatch, which is great. But then it's like, you know, there's people that are getting fairly competent at, you know, let's call it mastering it or being able to do it repetitively, safely. Then they don't have the movement efficiency to do something very basic like a one-legged deadlift or a seated one-arm press, or just, you know, a number of very basic unilateral things. Yet they're spending, you know, 3 sessions a week working on their snatch, which, you know, there's nothing specifically wrong with that, but you know, I think that they'd find, you know, people could find a lot of value from mastering simpler skills, which would obviously lend in time to the more compound, complex skills.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, what's next for you, Brent? What's on deck coming up here shortly for you? And I mean, we know you're in the competitive season, but anything that you want to share with everybody?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the big thing is just continuing to grow the Professor Project. We created it earlier in 2018, sort of after the games, and we sort of did these like limited launches where we, you know, get like a couple people into it and then we close it off, and then we did that again, a couple people and closed it off, just to make sure that they were getting value out of it and the content we were creating made sense. And, you know, we created systems to just, you know, keep that stuff rolling. And now it's open, you know, it's wide open and hopefully open forever, and just continuing to sort of keep that rolling and keep people learning, and create a community of people that can kind of communicate to me, ask me questions, and then ask each other questions, and sort of learn to become better as CrossFitters. But then also just, you know, like kind of learning, hopefully like a more mindful, thorough approach to the hour or two you spend in the gym, and, you know, the hours around that, to maximize that, and then ideally, you know, what's more important is that translates to the rest of your life. You know, I had a conversation with someone, you know, online about, you know, confidence in the gym and confidence in their work, and how they were sort of related to each other or not as related as they should be, and so on. And it's like, yeah, that's the real stuff, you know, like that's what's really going to make the difference, because for most people, like, the gym is just, it's part of their day. It's not the biggest part of their day, but, you know, it's such a cool tool to gain confidence and to, you know, to learn to be more patient or mindful or you know, or more aggressive, or whatever that, you know, you might need to express yourself in a different way. So continuing to grow that, and then just, you know, make it back to the games, kick ass when I'm there.
Yeah.
So it's basically go to China in April, win. Hopefully that's the plan, and then go to the games in August with all 199 other men apparently, and
win.
Navigate that, whatever that. I'm very interested to see how they're going to make that work.
Yeah.
From a athlete perspective, of course, but just from, like, you know, someone who's followed the sport now for 6 years, like, it's going to be a departure from what we're used to, and so seeing how that's going to unfold, and hopefully having a big part of that story.
Yeah. Well, hopefully for you, there's 199 guys that get in the water, and it's the first 10 that get across the lake are competing, and then you're just like, later, guys.
Exactly. Well, that's what's scary is that is ideal. But if it's not the lake, if it's just 100 air squats for time, and then okay, top 10 guys keep going, the other 190 go home. It's like, great, guys.
It's Tabata air squats. So just do that for the next 9 months or 7 months.
But what's new for you? Like, what's the plan in the next? We kind of talked about that a little bit, but like next couple of months here.
It's continuing to reach more people with the Awaken training series, and then similar programs that we're going to have available here shortly. It's exposing people to what it can look like to train with a little bit more purpose, a little bit more understanding of the why behind what you're doing, sort of slowing people down, allowing people to explore those movements that sort of have not been traditionally incorporated into a lot of the functional fitness programs we see. So there's the experience side, getting people to experience it, but then on the heels of what we were talking about, knowledge around why you're doing what you're doing is so important. And we're going to be creating, and we've already started to create, some online course material that shows people, hey, this is how you do this stuff correctly. This is why you're doing it this way. This is how you can utilize it in your own training or utilize it for your clients. There's an educational component that I've always felt strongly about wanting to share with people, and I think functional bodybuilding has really, that's been I put a stamp on that for the last couple of years, and the future looks like obviously continuing to get more people to do it, but also to learn about it and to learn why it's important and learn how it fits into a competitive landscape, or it just fits into the general population, because we've already seen it happening a lot where, everyday CrossFit gyms, I get a message from somebody like, oh man, I was at San Francisco CrossFit yesterday. They were doing the Philly press, and there's unilateral stuff showing up, and that's really good to see. And if I can continue to influence that, I think that's a really worthwhile mission for myself and for the team here, is to get that into more people's hands. Because there's not that many people that should be snatching 3 days a week. It's just not that many.
Yeah, I agree, right? If you get to that point where you're able to, then that's awesome. But some people never will, some people don't, and some people don't need to. There's all sorts of things there. But that's exciting, man. I love to hear that, and it's cool to hear that it's starting to to permeate. You're hearing, and like I hear it too. Like I'll be at a gym, and someone will be looking at a video or trying something you did online, and and they're humming and hawing over getting the real thing. I'm like, you won't regret it. Like, so I'm plugging you.
Yeah.
In person. I'm an ad.
I love it.
That's all I do.
Well, dude, this has been really a treat for me. I watch you. I watch what you're doing, and I think a lot of people would love to have an opportunity to sit down and talk with you and pick your brain. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that people that get to watch this really get like a different look inside some of these topics that we've discussed from a couple people that have learned by doing it for years, which I think is missing in a lot of places in the fitness community. People that they know everything, but it's like they haven't done anything yet. So this has been a super fun conversation for me. Any closing thoughts or things you want to share with people?
No, I was going to say the same thing, man. It's a pleasure, and from one of the guys that I looked up to when I started and stuff, and again, sorry about 2016. Thanks for setting times for me to beat, I guess. But it was this is fun, and I hope that the people that end up watching this get some value from this, and keep up with what you're doing and what I'm doing, and continue to do their thing.
And
I don't have much more to say. It's not a great closing.
And I'm sure we'll cross paths physically at some point in the future. And man, you're always welcome to come down to California if you need to get away from some cold weather. We have a little bit more warm weather here right now.
Yeah, there's snow on the ground as we speak. But yeah, and the same goes for you. Kelowna's pretty amazing if it gets too hot in the summer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
love it.
it's beautiful here. Cool, man. All right, well, yeah, let's wrap this one up and see you in person or on the internet again soon.
Absolutely. And thanks to your team for setting this up, and we're stoked to be part of it. So.